Hey guys, what is up? We are live. This is the movie discussion pocket dimension where time does not exist. The only thing that matters is film. I am Cole, joined by Jay's floating head. And here we are to kick off the first episode in a series. It's been a while since we've done our last series, and the series, as I'm sure it says in the information and some of the stuff we teased on Twitter beforehand, and even I think announced in the last show, is this is a series on British crime films. Now, we're being pretty loose in our definition of British crime because we're kicking off with a movie that is a British film, completely British, and it's about crime, but it's kind of not, maybe not what people think. It's not about specifically British crime, but we're going to do films about like that too. But so this is a more of an international crime type movie, a political thriller. This is The Day of the Jackal from, I believe, 1973, directed by Fred Zinnemann, and based on the novel the same name from 1971 by Frederick Forsyth. And this is my first time seeing the movie, although I was aware of it for years. I always knew what it was, more or less, I think. And it's kind of funny. A few weeks ago, Jay and I did a live commentary on a movie loosely based on an American movie made in the 90s, The Jackal, with, who is that? That's Richard Gere and Ben, and what's his name? Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis, yeah.
Yeah, which is very, very loose. Like, the only thing that's really has in common is that it's about some sort of high-profile assassin who's going to try to assassinate a fairly high-profile target, and, yeah, about him going about that and the people trying to catch him. Apart from that, it's a completely different movie. But they still use the name The Jackal because maybe they wanted that name recognition or whatever. But very different movies outside that loose sort of plot structure. So yeah, I'd never seen this movie before.
I had forgotten how different they were until I rewatched this film. And like you said, we watched The Jackal not too long ago, so it's a lot to this. There's a lot of build up to the actual assassination attempt.
Right. Yeah, this is a movie with a lot of moving parts, as they'd say. Mm-hmm. And I'm really impressed by how well it's carried off, because I think it was a very tight and efficient movie, which I don't think is easy to do when you have a lot of moving parts and you have the plot overall is simple, but what goes on within it is not. So, we've done, and movies don't always have to work this way, but it works really well for this particular movie, because there are movies out there that are more chaotic, more jumbled. And that doesn't always mean that they're like a complete mess or failure, but that wouldn't work in a delivery of a movie like this with the kind of plot it has. So, yeah, I'm just really impressed by just how efficient this movie is. It's like a Swiss watch, basically, and just how well it runs and how everything comes together. It's a bit longer runtime than the average movie. It's about 2 hours, 20 minutes, but I don't think it really feels that way. I think it really hums along. I don't think any scenes feel extraneous or unnecessary. I think it all really comes together quite well. I only watched it the once because I screwed up my days the other day. I should have watched this Monday night, and I just totally forgot what the days were and when we'd be doing this. See, we were supposed to do the show last night, and we ended up doing it tonight. But anyway, so it's too bad I had the opportunity to watch this more than once, and I kind of blew that. But yeah. But I really did enjoy it as a first-time watch of, again, a movie I was aware of for many years. I knew it was sort of considered one of the cooler movies back from the 70s and a very good British movie, and sort of an assassination thing, and sort of a grounded, realistic type of movie, which we'll talk about as we go on here, because that's, I think, a lot of the appeal of this movie is how realistic it is. And, of course, it blurs the line, too, because it opens with something that did happen in real life, if people are not aware, that in 1962, the terrorist organization, the AOS, really did try to kill French President Charles de Gaulle. that did actually happen. And it happened just pretty much like the way it's depicted in the movie, where he's going by in his motorcade, and there are assassins waiting on the road with automatic weapons, and they unload on the cars. And they managed not to kill, or even seriously hurt anybody, but it was really close. When they examined the car later on for the bullet holes, there was at least a couple bullets that whizzed right by de Gaulle's head. So he was extremely lucky. So yeah, that really did happen. then the movie diverges from reality, picks up a few months later the idea that the AOS is trying once again to finish the job, but this time in a maybe more subtle or professional manner by hiring somebody from outside the organization.
Right.
And that's where our titular character, the Jackal, comes in, played by Edward Fox.
A foreigner to...
Yeah, right. And that's, I guess, part of the... It's a British-made movie, mostly about French characters, although using British actors. But it's, although they can never... The whole point of the movie, and it ends that way, too, like, we're not really sure who the Jackal actually was, but it's heavily, at least, implied that he was a British citizen.
Yeah.
Although there's no way of being totally sure, because the whole point is he's very good at taking over people's identities and using them, and he does that several times in the movie. I mean, I'm not going to bore everybody with a bunch of historical context. All you have to really know is that, like, this was the AOS performed as a result of frustration with de Gaulle's decision to grant Algerian independence after a fairly long and costly civil war. And I can understand why it meant a lot to a lot of French citizens, not just in France, but there were plenty of French citizens, something like 3 million, living in Algeria at the time. And France had controlled Algeria since the mid-19th century. So this was a big deal. This is over 100 years that this happened, and there were quite a few people that were part of it that felt strongly about this decision. The guy they show getting executed at the end was the real guy, Jean-Baptiste Thiry, and he'd been a member of the French Air Force, and he was also some sort of like weapons engineer. He invented some kind of missile. So this was a very professional military guy. But anyway, at the time, and I give him credit, he was the head of the AOS when it happened. So it wasn't like he just delegated the position to other people. It was him and several other guys who, not all of them were caught. One of them managed to get away and lived until the age of 71 in 1994. But the rest were caught, and they were executed fairly quickly, which I realize was controversial too, with certain people maybe not giving them full trial or whatever. The idea, especially with him, Bastien Thiry himself, was because as the leader and as a very, I guess, respected and influential guy, they were worried that the longer they held him, the more they'd be open to people trying to break him out and escape attempts. And actually, the first time they moved him, it was like a huge deal. There was all sorts of soldiers and motorcade stuff involved. It was really high profile. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he remains the last French citizen to be executed by firing squad. And so that whole first few minutes of the movie follows real history quite closely. But yeah, so that's where the AOS come in this movie. Them just sort of trying again. Now, the AOS also weren't like a lot of the terrorists. Although I'm sure there were plenty that liked them too, but I mean, maybe when people think of terrorism, not to say that others aren't organized. I mean, some of those Middle Eastern ones like ISIS and stuff, they have organization, but the AOS was very well organized and very well funded. It maybe wasn't like a group of extremists and radicals that maybe some people think they were. Again, these were people that felt a deep connection to Algeria and felt that that France, sort of walking away from it was a horrible mistake, and that it was a waste of. Again, there was a civil war where people died for it and that kind of thing. De Gaulle, of course, you could do a whole movie on him. What a figure Charles de Gaulle was, one of those larger than life figures who eventually became a president. And of course, just like all great men, as they say, he had there was a lot of controversy about things he did. And one of them, as part of the Algeria thing, was he became sort of, I don't know if he would use these words himself, but it's almost like anti-imperialism in a way, which a lot of Europeans probably didn't understand at the time, because that was sort of what Europeans did. And not just Europeans, of course, because the U.S. inherited from the European heritage. Was he was quite critical of the U.S.'s role in Vietnam at the time. Like he saw that as American imperialism. So he was a very interesting, dynamic, and of course controversial figure. And the assassination attempt they show at the beginning of the movie, I said, really happened. The one at the end didn't, but there were actually other assassination attempts made on his life by the AOS too that aren't mentioned in the movie. So he survived several. He never did get killed, although this movie came out in 1973, so he had already died of sort of natural causes about 2 years before him. But yeah, Charles de Gaulle, really big, one of the big movers and shakers of 20th century. Sure, certainly one of the major figures of France. And you get to see a pretty good likeness of him. The actor playing him at the end looks a great deal like him if you look up pictures of the guy. So they kind of, I mean, he didn't have to do anything. He didn't have any lines or anything. But I mean, as far as looking the part, they did a good job there and finding a pretty good look-alike. But anyway, after the first few minutes and the whole execution by firing squad thing, that's when the movie takes over with its own plot and the idea of the AOS hiring out to a foreign contract killer. And that's where we get the Jackal. And we have seen that actor before. He was in the movie The Bounty, which we covered on this channel several years ago. He was one of the sailors there, although I don't particularly remember him. That's Edward Fox. I looked him up. His character was named Captain something. I'm like, how many captains were there? Because, I mean, we all remember, the main captain, Captain Bligh, was Anthony Hopkins. But this was some other captain? I don't know. Maybe he wasn't on the Bounty. Maybe he was just a minor character on the ship. I can't remember. It's been too long. But I did look him up, and I saw, okay, so we've done at least one other movie that he was in before this.
Yeah, I'm looking through his filmography now. He's done a ton of stuff.
Yeah. Was I saying AOS? Or it's OAS. Sorry, I think I was saying AOS. It's OAS, Organisation de l'Armée Secrète. But it's OAS, sorry. Yeah, Edward Fox, apparently, like his whole family is an acting family. He has quite a few, there are quite a few actors in the Fox line, although I don't necessarily know them too well.
Michael J.
Is he? I don't know. He could be. I'll have to look up. The Bounty. I mean, he was in some very big British movies. I've seen A Bridge Too Far. I've never seen Gandhi all the way through because it's super long, but he's in Gandhi too. So, he's already there. But he comes from the Robin Fox family. I guess it starts with Let's see. Robin Fox was a theatrical agent born in 1913. Edward Fox was one of his sons. And various people he married. Tracy Reed was an actress. James Fox is maybe his brother, who had a son, Lawrence Fox. Some young actor born in '85 named Jack Fox. Anyway, these are all actors. Maybe they're not household names, but they're all actors. So yeah, spanning about a century, we've got like a century worth of actors with the Fox name. I mean, I guess he's probably the most well known.
The whole movie hinges on him too, and he really does a great job of being just such a, he's very focused and very very cold in what he's doing, and he has no. He's just trying to get the job done, whatever it takes.
Right. It comes back to the realism of the movie. Like, I think we all enjoy movies with like crazy assassins that are very sort of over the top and larger than life. They're very threatening, or they have like insane skills. Like, but I mean, this isn't that kind of movie, and I appreciate it for that. It feels very real. He feels more like what a real life assassin would be like. He's very efficient, but as you say, he's very cold. He's not into like intimidating people. Like, even the people he kills, like he just like he kills them sort of without warning. Like, he doesn't threaten people. He doesn't show emotions or get angry or anything like that. And we have talked about this before too, and we can get into it now, I guess, even though it's a little later. It's like, by the time he's doing the assassination attempt, things have really gone wrong for him. He knows that everybody's onto him. And you wonder, like, why is he doing it? And you think, is it professionalism? Is it sort of just his own code? Because we talked about that too, right? How sometimes you've got killers in movies and they have like a code, like they have to fulfill the contract no matter what or whatever. And that's he never says anything about it. He doesn't have conversations with anybody. But we just see him, even though he gets like warnings from his network telling him, they're on to you, they're following you. Like, he never wavers. He tries to accomplish his mission, probably knowing that he'll die in the attempt.
Right. Well, that's why he charges so much too, isn't it? Like 500, I don't know, pounds, whatever, or 500,000.
Yeah, he says dollars, so he must mean U.S. dollars.
Oh, dollars, okay.
Which in 1963 is a ton. Like, it's enough nowadays, but imagine in 1963, that's several $1 million in 1963.
Essentially enough money for him to be able to retire, because someone who does this and actually pulls it off, you'll never be able to work again, I guess.
Right.
Is kind of how he looks at it.
Yeah, you'd assume like if he could like successfully complete it, he'd get the rest of his money and disappear to some faraway country, never to be seen or heard from again. There wouldn't be any reason to keep doing it. Although again, sometimes there's stories about like assassins who maybe made enough money, but they don't know how to do anything else, so they don't even do anything with the money. You know, they just sort of take the money, but they still keep taking jobs anyway. This guy again seems more realistic. It seems like he probably they point out that he's done some successful jobs before they hire him. They mention he did a few jobs here and there, so that's one of the reasons he can have his price so high. It's that he had done good work. Although, of course, to assassinate the president of a nation is really, really high profile stuff. And any president or prime minister of a nation is well guarded. But de Gaulle, they'd already had a big assassination attempt on him, so they knew that there'd be even more security around him. Although they do point out there's a part towards the end, where they're talking about how now that they know a little more about the situation, like we've asked de Gaulle, to cancel his upcoming public appearances, and he won't do that, which I think is very in line with the real life de Gaulle. He was that kind of man. So, yeah, even though the stuff that happens afterwards in the movie did not actually happen in real life, I think they did a good job of making it like what it would be like if it had it happened. The Jackal. So yeah, it's funny. So this is a movie that's a British movie, as we said, as part of our thing. So it's all British actors basically playing French people, but not even trying accents. It's just we see that enough, like in movies, like American movies, where everybody's foreign is just speaking English or whatever. And it's the same thing here. Like they don't in any way to make them seem French. We're just supposed to use our imaginations. Okay, these are French people speaking French, but as we see it in here, it's English actors speaking English in their English accents, which is fine. I don't think that breaks the reality too much because we see it in a lot of movies. We get kind of used to it as an audience, so I don't mind that too much.
Yeah, I was kind of taken aback by it at first, just because I was like, "Wait, he's in France, right? Why is everyone speaking English?"
Yeah. I mean, Zinnemann himself technically was an American citizen, although he was born in Austria-Hungary. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much time he spent over there, so he's a bit of a crossover. Oh, he directed From Here to Eternity. I knew he had directed High Noon, which is a very famous Western. And he also did the 1977 film Julia, which is a very critically acclaimed movie. I don't know how popular it is, but it gets brought up a lot. It's a very good movie. Which he did a few years after this. Yeah, this movie's 73. The book was 71. He directed Oklahoma. That's funny. That was on just the other day on TCM. So yeah, it's a British film, but not a British director.
I know, and until you mentioned that, it never even crossed my mind that we're doing this in the British crime series. But
I think he lived a lot of his life in England. And that's where he died. So he did eventually maybe even become a British citizen. I don't know, but I mean he was born in Austria-Hungary, and then when did he come to the U.S.? I'm not sure exactly how old he was when he came to the U.S. But by at least the 40s, he was in the U.S. because that's by then he had started working in the film industry. He was born in 1907, so he might have been like in his 30s even by the time he went to the U.S. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that. But anyway, yeah. Still, I mean, almost all the cast of this is British, and I would assume a lot of the crew. So it's still definitely a British movie, I would say. Yeah, like here, the British Film Institute ranked it as the 74th greatest British film in all of the 20th century. So there you go. So they classify it as a British film, so it absolutely is one. As we said, we knew it was British. So yeah, this is a British crime series, but we're going to do ones that focus on crime that is British, but that's actually not the focus of this one. This is a British film about like international crime, political stuff, but that's what this one is. But yeah, I always forget the word for this, even though I looked it up a little while ago. It's like diegetic, something jetic. That means there's no actual soundtrack to the movie. It just means all the music in the movie is within the movie. There's very little music in this. In fact, really the only music you hear is towards the end when they're doing the parade stuff. Right. And there's also a scene where when he checks into a hotel, the lobby, there's music being played. And again, I think that really works for the what they're trying to get across with this movie and making it feel very realistic. Not that like having movies having soundtracks makes them unrealistic. I just think, I don't know, it's just a tone thing. It's just a choice. Another movie in the 70s that does the same thing that I like a lot and bring up a lot is the China Syndrome from '79, which is the same thing. The China Syndrome just lets you focus on the story. There isn't any music going on. The only music you might hear again is within the movie, which might be called diegetic or some other word that I constantly forget, even though, I looked it up recently. But yeah, but I think it's a really good choice here. It just feels so real.
Yeah, it does. It really adds to the realism, I think.
Because they really show you sort of, and you have to give credit to the novel, I suppose, for just like how well thought out this is, like how an assassin would go about performing this kind of job and the things he'd have to do. And that's really what the movie's about. Like, it's a simple plot, but it's complicated what he has to do to put himself in a position to pull this off. And, things like forging identity papers, and when he does go through that, he gets a specially custom made rifle for the job, which is pretty cool, the thing he makes, because it's such a minimalistic weapon. Like, there's almost nothing to it, right? It's very light and small, and just like it has a long barrel, but it's a pretty impressive weapon that they make, and it can fire exploding bullets, which is
I don't even know if that's a real thing.
Yeah, that part might not be real.
But, in comparison to the remake, very, not nearly as sophisticated as the thing Bruce Willis gets.
Right. Bruce Willis gets like a high tech, like remote controlled gun. That's right, for his, which is interesting, but there's something to be said for like the precision of being up and taking the shot rather than like pressing some buttons or something like mows everybody down.
Right.
Although, you're going for, you want to be sure. So, they both work within the framework they're in, I suppose. And again, the Jackal is quite different, so it might as well go its own way as far as that stuff goes too. I don't mind it. As we said, they're very different movies.
Yeah, very different.
But we do get to see some real world organizations, not just the OAS, but we get to see what's that? Are they called the Action Service or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, who are kind of like France's. They're kind of like the CIA. I'm saying kind of because I'm sure there's difference, but they perform covert operations often on foreign soil for France, and they show them doing that where they kidnap a high-ranking member of the OAS, and that's how they start to get some of their information. They don't show specifically what they do to him, but obviously they torture him to death basically in the interrogation. And they do get some key pieces of information out of it. I like how they treat that. Not that I'm against showing stuff like that, but I think it's better having it more implied in the movie. Like, there's a part where like later they have the other agents and they're just listening to like the transcript or whatever, like the tapes, and they're like, next question. And then he starts to scream. And they're like, good God, what did you do to him here? Like, it's effective. I think it's effective like that, not necessarily showing it. But that was the action guys, or whatever they call the Action Service.
That's a very generic name.
Yeah. Are they still around? Yeah, they're still around. Yeah, they're now they are known as the Action Division, but at the time they were the Action Service. So yeah, they're still in operation. I don't have time to get into all of it, but yeah, they've been around since the Second World War, like a lot of these various covert organizations. But yeah, we get to see a little bit of it. It's something of like a cat and mouse type game. They're aware of the OAS, and they even say that we have like some of our own covert operatives like have infiltrated. He said, but we can't get enough out of them because the whole point is only the higher ups hired this guy, and nobody actually, even they don't know who he really is. Like, they don't have actual links to him.
Right.
So you get to see sort of the two sides and how they play things out against each other, all the while the assassin making his moves as he gets closer to the target. It's a big deal to them that he can get into France, but he seems to move about Italy just fine. So I don't know, because he starts off like after he meets them, and he meets them in Austria, because in the aftermath of the failed assassination attempt and the execution of those guys, what remained of the leaders of the OAS, they move to Austria, and that's where they meet the Jackal, and that's where they hire him. And then from there, he goes to Italy, and he goes to Genoa, and that's where he, I think, meets the forger. But while he's actually not even on French soil when he finds the grave of that baby whose name he decides to steal. So I was like, was that kid born in France but buried in Italy? There's a few little things like that I'm not entirely clear on. There's some details that either I missed or maybe the movie just doesn't make explicit. Because I was just like, if this is like the citizen, and it's the name he uses for like most of the movie. The name,
Paul something?
Dugan. The name with Dugan. Yeah, Dugan is the name he stole from the dead kid. Paul. Yeah, you're right. Paul Oliver Dugan. So I'm just saying, like, was that supposed to be a French citizen? Because he was buried in Italy. Because that's where he was when he. I'm pretty sure that's where he was when he checked the grave and then went into the office to look up the records. Plus, there's stuff like that I'm not clear on because I'm not exactly sure how records like that worked back then. It seemed odd to me that he could just walk in off the street and get those records. But he did.
Yeah, I can't imagine it was very sophisticated. Record keeping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's a 70s movie set in the 60s. As you see, like, when you look at, like, movies, even right up into the 80s, stuff like, now identity theft's its own thing now because of various, hacking abilities. Right now, people can hack into things. But for the most part, stuff is supposed to be more secure because of it being electronic. Because, yeah, back in the day, there were so many things that were, you just can't do now. They were so easy back then. Because, there weren't these huge databases full of information on people. You could, like, steal someone's ID, and if it looked a little bit like you, they'd be like, okay, yeah, I guess that's you.
Yeah.
So speaking of which, just before my birthday was about a week ago, and my driver's license was set to expire on my birthday, so I renewed it online, and I used the same picture because it was fine, and they mailed it to me. The new Nova Scotia driver's licenses suck. I really hate them, and part of the reason why I didn't understand because it always been like a color photo. And it was not huge, it was big. But now the photo is black and white and smaller. And the reason for that has something to do with now they're using some sort of facial recognition software, which for some reason works better with black and white. I don't know. But anyway, look. Plus the whole thing's tinted blue, like the whole license. I can't stand how it looks. It looks awful. Couldn't believe this is what I'm going to have for a while. Not that I have to pull it out that often, but it just seems like a huge step backwards. Because like now my picture is smaller and black and white. But
facial recognition for what? Like, just to verify that it's you? Yeah,
I guess so.
Huh.
But yeah, I didn't know about it until I was like, what the hell? So I looked into it. So yeah, it's some sort of, it makes it more compliant with some sort of facial recognition software that, I don't know, government uses or law enforcement or what. But that's supposedly the reason. It just seems so dumb to go from a fairly decent looking color picture to a smaller black and white picture. It just seems like going backwards, but whatever, if that's what they want to do.
That sounds like what China has. Don't they do a lot of facial recognition stuff with?
Yeah, they're pretty much
cameras?
Yeah, they're pretty much like at the forefront of it. They do it before anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know exactly what this pertains to or what specifically it'll be used for, but that's supposedly why the Nova Scotia driver's licenses look like shit. I really don't like it, but anyway, yeah, but. Yeah, back in the day, it was and plus forging stuff. Like, remember, this was based on real life. The movie Catch Me If You Can.
I was
all
just
the
going to bring that
forging
up,
and stuff he got away with. Yeah. Like, you can't do any of that now. And some of it is because he himself, the actual guy, started helping the FBI and people learn how to stop it. But I mean, he used to just trace stuff and copy stuff and forge signatures, and that was always good enough. Pay him for stuff with checks that were never gonna clear and all that stuff. Like. You can't do that now. Now, if you're going to get into identity theft, it's completely electronic. You hack somebody's account, you steal their identity that way, which is its own problem. But at least it means now, yeah, I miss all those interesting things. It's not like I would have been part of it anyway. It's not like I'm gonna be a forger, but it all fascinates me. It's kind of sad that like its day is over. Here's the one that really fascinates me. I can't remember. There's a specific word for it, but it happened in like the late 70s, early 80s, and it was where people learned how to basically hack payphones, where you could hack payphones in a way so you could get yourself free long distance calls and things like that. There's a whole word for it. And these were the same people who were some of the earliest hackers on like actual computers too, like some of the stuff you see in the movie War Games, like using that kind of stuff.
Right.
But yeah, there's an actual name for the phone thing. Like it can't just be phone jacking, but it's something like that.
They would play a certain tone, right? And I would let you do whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember they were just like fucking around with like a recorder, the flute thing. Just and that's how they figured it out. Just
and they could do like whatever like an operator could do. Like they had all those abilities, and it's not like even they needed to make long distance phone calls. They just racked up long distance phone calls like to fuck with them, which I kind of respect. I have to say, I kind of respect that. But what the hell is the word for it?
Wind talkers.
Telephone. I think I'm just finding.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Nowadays, now if you look up, it's freaking. That's what it is. It's phone freaking.
That's
with a PH. Because at first when I looked up like phone stuff, all I got was like how people hack cell phones now. But I was I'm talking about the analog phones. But freaking. That's what it is. Freaking. PHREAKING. There's a article on it. I know that has nothing to do with this movie, but stuff like that always makes me think of like, the bygone eras when certain things that you couldn't do nowadays were possible. And I always thought freaking was really interesting too, because of just sort of the creativity involved in it. But yeah. Study, experiment, explore, telecommunication systems. I guess there are more modern versions of it now too, but I mean, I'm talking about like the original stuff.
Right.
Because nowadays you can still do stuff that's supposedly related to it. Possibly one of the first freaking methods with switch hooking, which allows placing calls from a phone where the rotary dial, so you know that anymore, or keypad, has been disabled by a key lock or other means to prevent unauthorized calls from that phone. It is done by rapidly pressing and releasing the switch hook to open and close the subscriber circuit, stimulating the pulses generated by the rotary dial. Even most current telephone exchanges support this method, as they need to be backward compatible with old subscriber hardware. There's more. I won't bore everybody going into the details. But I remember one day, like ages ago, like reading up on all this stuff and just being really fascinated by it. I know it's not related to this, but all that makes me think of like whenever they show sort of like old school ways of forging things or hacking things and all that stuff that you can't do now. Just like when we talk about like serial killers and how there's less of them nowadays. The two big reasons are DNA and the other thing is like cameras. We even talked about it a little bit when we watched like Drugstore Cowboy. Like how easy it was for them to go into pharmacies and rob them. Like even a little rinky-dink pharmacy nowadays has way better security. There's always like that stuff is locked up tight in like safes and stuff. There's always a security camera. But back in the day, people just went in and distracted the clerk and cleaned the place out. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think by necessity they had to increase that security just because. If you got pills, they're going to go in there and get them one way or another,
All right. Crime, just like everything else, like society evolves and then crime like evolves to adapt to like the new stuff. That's how it goes. But a lot of that old school analog paper trail stuff has always really fascinated me. So you get a little bit of that in this movie about how he's like moving around with stolen identities using forged documents. And this, like he uses like a guy who's like a professional forger, although we don't really see him work. But that guy gets too greedy because he knows whatever his client is up to is a big deal. So he tries to blackmail him, and he winds up being the first victim we see of the Jackal.
Yeah. Yeah, not smart.
So we know he kills him, but we don't actually see him kill him, right? I mean, all he does is knock him out, right? There's no way that killed him. Like, he just seems to, like, punch him and knock the wind out of him because he seems to hit him in the stomach.
I thought he broke his neck.
Maybe he did then. Because the other thing I was going to say is, like, every time he kills somebody, I'm never clear on how he does it. Now, when he kills the last man, not counting the copy shot, that is deliberately off camera. It just shows him walking towards it, and then, they're out of the shot. That's fine. Right. Use your imagination. But, like when he kills that aristocrat woman, I have no idea how he does that. Like, he
I mean,
leans in to kiss her, and then she just goes limp. It's true we don't see one of his hands, but I mean, if he's strangling her, she's gonna fight.
well,
There's gonna be some resistance. And they never show that he has like a syringe or anything. So he just leans in to kiss her, and then she dies during the kiss. And I get it, we don't see his hand, but what could he possibly be doing? I don't know.
his hand was around her neck, but it was awfully quick, and you're right, like she didn't fight at all.
She didn't struggle, yeah. So sometimes I think they go, maybe it's just to add some mystique to him. Like, he's almost too efficient a killer because he seems to kill with such little effort.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't mind that. I'm just saying sometimes when things like that happen in movies, I wonder if I missed something. Like, I'm like,
It was so quick that I had to rewind it a few times to watch it again because
yeah, I literally did the same thing.
Wait, is she dead?
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, that's one of the things. Like, there was a couple times in the movie where things like that happened, and I wasn't clear exactly what happened. I wasn't sure if I had just missed it or if like the movie just deliberately doesn't show you. Well, I guess they probably just were again sort of being ambiguous, just like he can kill anybody. Okay, sure.
Well, it makes you wonder too, like if she hadn't asked, what's going on, maybe she would have lived.
I think so. I think if she hadn't, and it shows like how cold and efficient he can be because I think I believe her. She says, the cops were here. I didn't have anything I could really tell them. She's just like, I don't care what you've done. I'll hide you. I'll help you. Like, I think she meant it, but he was, still couldn't take that chance, right? No, can't have witness, can't have somebody who knows take her out. Because I mean, the whole reason he sleeps with her in the first place just seems to be like boredom.
Yeah, Jacob
right? He's at the hotel, and he doesn't have any real reason for going up to this woman. It's just like, maybe I can get some.
Yeah. I mean, I guess.
I mean, later it is somewhat useful because after he wrecks the car, he has a place he can go because he finds out her address. But again, she didn't tell him the address. She was prepared to have like a one-night stand with him and move on. But this is funny too. It's like, did he somehow kill that old woman? He didn't. So a very fortuitous, coincidence is like an old woman in the room dies. So then, like, in the confusion while the authorities are coming in to haul her out and stuff, he gets to go over to the hotel counter and look in the book and find her address. Because you almost think from it, wait, did he kill this old woman somehow? We didn't know. It's like he can just kill anybody, it seems. But I think that was just a coincidence that he just got lucky on. OAS. Hopefully I'm saying OAS.
Yeah, so he wrecks the car, which
is sort of sloppy, right? We've seen him be so efficient so long. It's the first really sloppy thing he does because he's speeding along in one of those country roads for kind of no reason and almost has a head-on collision with another car, causing him to crash. So that's like the first time you see him kind of make a mistake, and things kind of get worse from there. I mean, it's not his fault that they were able to get some information out of that guy they kidnapped. And of course, the OAS have their own moles within the cabinet because they very easily do the honey trap thing. They have like some woman who works for them, and they use her to like seduce one of the cabinet members, one of those military attaché guys. I like how like she meets him too. She like almost makes him fall off his horse. And it's so realistic too. It's true. Like, he's an older guy. Like, why would she care about him? But he thinks of himself as like this great important guy. He has power. So, he doesn't even question for a second that he's effortlessly been able to like pick up this young, attractive woman, and now she's going to start sleeping with him. And that's so like real life. Men like that they're all over the place right now. They're like, of course she's attracted to me. I'm so powerful and important and awesome. Yeah. But I know some women kind of are too. I mean, I'm not going to go against that. There's plenty of women that are willing to shtup old guys if it means power and money and things, but I don't know. He doesn't seem to be worried about any of it. And you also see her persuasiveness too. Like, he comes back after the meeting, after they all say this information cannot leave this room. And then after he slept with her, he says, oh, there was this whole thing. She's like, well, what was it? He's like, yeah, nothing. Well, what was it? Nothing. She asked one more time, and then it cuts out. We don't see it, but that's all it took. He's like, okay, I'll tell you. Because again, part of him wants to, because it wants to help tell her how important he is, right? Oh, I'm part of the Security Council and blah, blah, blah. And there's a possible, thing about de Gaulle. Like, I'm sure I'm glad they don't show it, but it's just so easy to imagine that he'd be thrilled to tell her.
Yeah.
He winds up killing himself in the end, which is kind of shocking. kind of show, I guess, some of that honor, I guess, the French have, even though he in no way comes across as French. Again, you have to remember these are supposed to be French people because they're all speaking completely British. But because he fesses up. They said there had to have been a leak. And I mean, obviously, the cop who did it, he knew which one it was. He didn't announce it to the room because it's not his voice on the phone. It's after he'd fallen asleep, and she goes and uses the other phone and contacts her OAS contact. So that guy stands up and says, "I regret to inform you, it was me." And then he just leaves. Like, would they let him leave? But anyway, he leaves and goes home and kills himself. Maybe that's done a little rushed. Because when she comes back, expecting to see him, and she finds him dead, the cops are already there. I mean, I get it. He killed himself. It almost looks like the cops fucking killed him, and now they're waiting for her, which wouldn't make any sense. Of course, the cops would not kill him. But yeah, sometimes I felt that was a little rushed. It didn't get the point. I mean, I guess I got it. So what am I worried about? I got it. He killed himself out of shame or whatever to atone for his mistake, I suppose. But yeah. That her character was Denise, by the way. At least that's the name she used.
I'm trying to see LaBelle.
Colonel St. Clair.
LaBelle is deputy commissioner of the Action Service. I'm trying to figure out.
I think
because it's a few different organizations that we go through.
Right. But I have this. Yeah, so LaBelle is a cop. What happened was the Interior Minister was one of the ones who had that cabinet meeting, and then the police commissioner was there. His name is Berthier, and so the police commissioner was part of the meeting, and then they asked him who his best man was, and he recommended him. He recommended Claude LaBelle, because LaBelle is the cop that winds up catching him, but he's just an ordinary cop. But they give him special powers, like above normal cop stuff. They do. There is a line there saying something like, he'd have more authority or whatever than a normal cop would have.
Because I mean, they're on him like the entire movie. As soon as it starts, like they're aware of, they know his code name. That's pretty much it at the beginning. But they learn more and more, and he crashes the car, and they potentially could have found him there, but
that's another thing I was a little unclear of too. I realized that during the interrogation of the guy they kidnapped, he gave up a little bit of information, including the code name Jackal, but it wasn't much to go on. And I wasn't really sure what got them onto the first part of the paper trail, because they very quickly find out that he's using that name, that he's using the Dugan name, right?
This has a good bit of nudity in it for a PG movie.
Yeah, well, European.
I mean, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, that's true. There's just some shots of Denise herself, and also the older woman that the Jackal seduces. What is her name?
Yeah, and you get to see the Jackal's butt at one point too.
Oh, that's right. He's in shape.
Yeah.
But yeah, this movie came out in 1973, which is the same year as Roger Moore's first Bond film, Live and Let Die, which isn't that ridiculous, but it is kind of funny that, like, in the next couple of years, especially starting really with the next Bond movie, which I think was 1974, which was The Man with the Golden Gun. This is where Moore's really silly era started. So I like this movie because it's and I don't mind any of that. It's fine. But this movie is like a great contrast to that. Like, James Bond is like the fantasy secret agent, but this is sort of more like secret agents in the real world. Works really well. Nice contrast for that same era.
Yeah, this is very much serious. Very serious in tone.
Again, it's except for the original part, which did really happen. It is all fiction, but I think the author really did try to ground it in reality and to approach it in a way that would seem realistic and seem believable to, something that could actually happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know how much the book gets into the background or not. I think it's good that the movie kind of doesn't. The OAS already has made their decision. We don't have any scenes of them philosophizing or talking about it, really. The idea is, to them, de Gaulle has betrayed them.
Right.
about Algeria was a betrayal of not just themselves but France, and that's one of the things that I'm not going to say makes them different from other terrorist organizations. They're a terrorist organization. They assassinate people. They do all this sort of stuff. But it involves, like, again, not just a bunch of radicals on the streets, but some of these guys were officials in the military itself who kind of defected because they were upset about the direction de Gaulle had gone in from that, including the guy at the start. As I said, he was a fairly important Air Force member. And we see the heads of them. You know, these are all older, established men. They're just young radicals who are like, oh, you know, bring down the system, man. No, these are guys that were part of the system and felt betrayed and disillusioned by it, which really was what the real OAS was. I'm sure there's probably still people that exist in the world today where the whole subject of Algeria is still like a really, you know, a really testy thing, something that brings up pain. But the movie itself does not get into that. It has its little prologue where it mentions that, and then it's said, and that's good enough. Then after that, it's, you know, here's the Jackal going on his mission, and here's the people trying to thwart him, and it works really well. Very efficient, as we said.
Yeah, and I like the scene when he's testing the rifle, and he, you know, sights in his scope, and then he finishes it off with the exploding bullet.
Yeah,
blows up the watermelon.
A very, very different scene of that is kind of done in the Jackal, right? Where he's with the tech played by Jack Black, who he eventually uses for target practice himself with it. Blast, like, what does he do? Like blast his arm off or something?
Yeah.
So it takes something fairly normal and humdrum and blows it up again, sort of, where he's just testing out this gun, shooting like watermelons or some sort of melon or something like that. Adjusting the sight to this crazy techno gun. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to use this on a real human target. Oh, hold on 2 seconds.
Sure.
I can't believe this. I'm going to mute this.
I was about to say I thought I heard a knock, but yeah, it's very much a contrast to the Bruce Willis Jackal film. With it's very big, you know. It's like they take what's in this film and just blow it up, so it's, you know, just a huge deal with the massive gun, and, you know, it blows off Jack Black's arm, for God's sakes, when he, you know, it's the sights are off, or whatever you call the, I don't know if it's still considered a sights when you're using because he's got like a laptop and he brings it up on that, but holds up his pack of cigarettes. You're muted. Still muted.
No, I'm not. Am I? Yeah.
There you are.
Yeah. I say, what else can I do? I thought I took precautions so that wouldn't happen, but happened anyway. Anyway, it's over. We can continue.
I was typing you a message in the private chat that I thought someone was knocking on your door.
Someone was. Someone forgot something here. Anyway, no big deal. Where are we at?
Yeah, check this one out, Jess. I think it's a really good movie.
It reminds me of... Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't even know how I found out about this movie, because like when I saw the Bruce Willis film, I didn't know it was a remake.
Yeah,
I don't know, but anyway, I sought it out, and, you know, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I can't tell you how long I've been aware of it, but I've been aware for a very long time. Yes, I get the reference there. Yes, it's not. If it wasn't right the first time, well, I would be right the next 50 times. But yeah, some movies, you know, you're not really sure when you became conscious of them. I'm not really sure when I became conscious of it, but for going back quite a while, I can remember that I was aware of it, and I loosely knew what the plot was. Like, there was like an assassination going on somewhere. I don't think I probably didn't originally know it involved the Gaulle. I don't know. I probably didn't know about the OAS, but those blanks get filled in over time. But It's funny. The movie we did, Sorcerer, has a scene near the beginning that is shot kind of the same way as this and feels a lot like it. Remember when they have like the hitman in like Mexico or something? Because remember, Sorcerer opens with those little vignettes to show where all the characters came from and why they're on the run and why they all wind up down in South America. And most of them, one's in like the U.S. and I think, and then there's one in, yeah, one's in U.S. It's like what is it? They robbed the mob game. One's in like Mexico, and then two others are over in Europe. The French guy is like the bank guy that like embezzles or something like that. But I'm pretty sure the assassin was in Mexico. Anyway, that whole bit with the assassin reminds me a lot of this. Kind of shot the same way, very matter of fact. Now that movie was from the 70s, set in the 70s, but the 60s and 70s can look a lot the same. Yeah. And of course, another movie that I like a lot that I recommend to people that I did not do well, and maybe it's just because it was a Spielberg movie and people expect different things from Spielberg, but way back, I remember we did a Sausage Factory episode just all about Spielberg and the movie. You know, the movie I always bring up for him that I love so much, and we've done on one of the first episodes we done on this channel is Empire of the Sun. Love Empire of the Sun. But another movie I like a lot by him, not that much, but I do like, is the 2005 film Munich, which once again was about real terrorism in the world, where, you know, those where that terrorist faction kidnapped and executed those athletes during the Munich Olympics, and the horrible botched police response by the German police afterwards. Anyway, and then the movie, you know, that's the background for the movie, and then the movie's about the Mossad agents that are trying to hunt down and take out the people responsible. You know, it has the same sort of look as this movie. It's 60s or I know it's 70s again, but 60s and 70s Europe, and so that sort of real worldness. You know, it's about secret agents and clandestine meetings and assassinations and all that stuff. I think it gives off a similar vibe. I even wonder if Munich took some cues from this movie. Munich did not do well. I think a lot of people thought it was slow and plodding and heavy-handed. I'm not going to say they're wrong, but I liked it. Munich's also another one of those movies that actually has a message because it's so much based on truth. And I know it's another really complicated issue because, like, at the end of the day, like in Munich, it's sort of like, okay, well, does this really accomplish anything? Like, is it really helping anybody or anything? You know, you're taking something sort of personal like revenge, but turning it into like official foreign policy. I don't know. Because it wasn't about like arresting these guys and putting them on trial. It was about killing, finding them wherever they were and killing them. And they did. Mossad are very good at what they do. But anyway, that's a different movie. But I can't help but think a little about that movie when I watch this. It has a sort of just the same sort of vibe and everything. And again, being set in Europe. I know this movie is set about a decade earlier, taking place in 1963. And again, all part of that whole blanket of the Cold War, right? Movies set during that era, like basically post-World War II, right up through the end of the 80s. They all have this interesting feel that comes from being set in the Cold War. Even though, again, this is not necessarily a Cold War type situation. This is an internal situation that France has to deal with on their own. It's a terrorist organization that has grown up through France and Algeria. It's not some sort of Soviet thing, but the whole world still is part of that East-West dynamic, and you see that. Because, I mean, it's even back then, and I think that's why this is around the time, like, borders were really starting to get tightened after World War II when this happened, right? It's like, how many scenes is of people checking their papers and things like that? So I think before World War II, moving between borders in Europe wasn't nearly as complicated and regulated as it would become. And, of course, the war itself and then the divide of East and West would be a big part of that. So you get to see a little look into this Cold War era world, even though the actual plot is not dealing with Cold War things. But I like a lot of that stuff. It's just cool. To the point that, like, that's why when they thought that maybe James Bond, even though, again, he's less realistic, a lot of people thought, like, after the last film, License to Kill, in 1989, when the 91 one fell through, which would have been a third one, with, I think, the underrated Timothy Dalton fell through, and then they had a few years of muddling through. It was the longest gap between Bonds ever. It was 6 years before, they came out with GoldenEye and Pierce Brosnan. But anyway, during that time, a lot of people thought, Bond is finished. It doesn't work anymore. We don't have the Cold War as a backdrop, which I think is a little silly because, I mean, it's 2021 now, and there's always some sort of new conflict. There's always some sort of new thing going on, right? I mean, sometimes I feel like in my lifetime, it's been badly defined. Like, I feel like the Cold War was so easily defined. Like, let's talk about, like, we don't want to talk about the in-between. Let's talk about, like, the post 9/11 world. Like, okay, there's tension, there's stuff going on in the Middle East, and that's like kind of all we get. Like, maybe because it's too complicated to have any sort of blanket term, because there's various things going on in various countries, and they all have different origins, and they all have different aims and goals. So but it always comes down to the same thing. It's just like, the Middle East is a dangerous place, or as Europeans and North Americans, there's a lot of tension between us and various Middle Eastern. It's all sort of vague. Because I guess that the point is, it isn't just one thing, right? It's different countries, different groups, different aims involving, And I realized it was pretty complicated within the Cold War too, but that still had like the whole Cold War blanket over it. It was still, I guess, something that was something easy to understand. Because I mean, really, we know, like, it's easy to talk about the broad strokes of the Cold War, but I mean, if somebody was saying, what was going on in Yugoslavia in 1965, like, that's a whole thing. I don't know. But it's a whole thing, trust me. So this idea that like something like James Bond or movies with espionage couldn't work just because the Cold War was no longer going on, I think is a little silly, because there's always international intrigue. There's always conflicts between countries. There's always terrorism. There's always things like rebellions and revolutions. Which works for a good backdrop for movies of this ilk.
Mm.
But what's I guess one of the interesting differences here, though, is like it's supposed to be a high-profile, highly politically motivated killing, but not the killer himself. The killer is just an instrument. He doesn't have any personal stake in this. He's not part of the cause. He's being hired out by the group. So that makes it a little bit different. It's not like he himself has anything against de Gaulle or has any sort of opinions on Algeria or any of the French stuff. Like, that doesn't matter to him. It's a job, and he's being paid for it, so he's going to do it. And that's really what the movie focuses on. As I said, like, we know their reasoning, but they don't dwell too much on it. It's just about, okay, he's in the field, he's going to go out there and execute now. And you can just let all that other stuff go. You don't have to think about it too much.
Right.
As you watch this guy like make his way through with like this really sort of uncanny, inhuman sort of precision. He's not a Terminator or anything, but he's a very determined, efficient, cold human being. There's a good performance.
Yeah, apparently they filmed the scene where he shoots the gunsmith with the rifle, but they cut it.
I was gonna say he doesn't actually kill. He's not shown. It was not even implied that he kills the gunsmith in the movie. It's like one of the people he doesn't kill. Like, the forger tries to blackmail him, so he kills him. The woman, I guess he feels is a loose end, so he kills her. The man from the bathhouse recognizes him because by this point, the secrecy's gone. They're showing him as a wanted murderer, so he has to kill him. He doesn't have any reason to kill the gunsmith, and it's not done in the movie. But it's interesting that originally they thought about it. I wonder if he kills him in the book.
Yeah, I bet he does. Because, in the remake, he kills him.
Yeah, very true.
So I guess we just assumed he killed the gunsmith as well.
I hadn't, though. I honestly hadn't.
Either.
Because, I mean, the gunsmith did exactly what he wanted him to do and didn't seem to pose any sort of issues or problems. I mean, when you're a gunsmith of that sort, you know what kind of people you're dealing with, and you know what kind of jobs they're doing. Like, the gunsmith isn't like, oh, you're going to kill somebody? I didn't know that. Like, he knows. So I don't think he's the type of guy he'd have to worry about. Seems like the type of guy that knows to keep his mouth shut. Not just for his own safety, but for just, his business continuing.
I was trying to do the math.
Everything's fine now.
The body count is 9, I believe. I was trying to do the math.
Do you mean his body count? Because I mean,
I think
obviously, we're not counting the guys executed at the start. That's a separate thing. Because I mean, I know, like I said, I only see him kill a handful of people. He kills the forger. He kills the woman. He kills the man from the bathhouse. At the end, he shoots the cop coming after him, and then he himself is killed. So that's only 4 by my count. But
I think it's total.
yeah, I'm not sure. There might be some more implied kills that I forgot about, like that they didn't show, but it's implied. As you said, I never thought it was implied he killed the gunsmith, honestly.
Me either.
Let me see if I can find out if he kills the gunsmith in the book. Do some quick scanning here. There's a magic gunsmith. I mean, it's the same thing in the book where in the book the forger tries to blackmail him and the jackal kills him. No, it doesn't mention. Yeah, it doesn't mention him killing the gunsmith in the book either, unless it's in a separate part. Like it's broken into parts. That's part 1, anatomy of a plot. Part 2, anatomy of a manhunt. Part 3, anatomy of a kill, and then an epilogue. The epilogue we do see in the movie. The epilogue is the bit where the real guy named Calthrop is wondering why the hell the cops are there, and they very quickly find out like Calthrop's a real person and he's not the he's not the jackal, because that's how the movie ends, right? They bury the jackal in an unmarked grave, having no idea who he actually was. Because for a long time they thought, oh, we found out who he is. He's actually this guy Calthrop. We found him. No. Then in the end they find no, there's a real Calthrop running around that this guy's been using the thing. Yeah. Oh, there's a gay bar scene in the book. Yeah, he gets to use even more disguises in the book, because that's another thing, right? He moves from place to place and he disguises himself in different ways, because he has to update it. Because when they first find out, they do get a decent, like it's pretty vague, but they get a decent description of what he really looks like, right? They're like, he's like about 5'10", he's got blue eyes and fair hair. Like very quickly, he tries to do something about that. Like when he seduces the woman, he's darkened his hair. And of course, he looks quite different when he's impersonating the Danish tourist and he has the glasses on.
Right.
Or he's like Par Lundquist or whatever.
I don't know if this was intentional, but when he goes and they're inspecting his luggage when he's trying to get into France.
Yeah.
Like all of the other guys in there, they look very similar to him. They have the same hair color and similar height. I just thought it was interesting. Yeah.
Does that mean at that point they had that description?
I think
maybe
so.
That's what it means, and that's why they pulled him over. Because that's another bit that either I missed or just wasn't shown was he has the gun with him at this point. So where is it? It's not in the luggage. Does that mean he hid it somewhere in the car that they didn't check? Because they don't show him doing that, do they? Because that's how I wondered.
I think they do. Isn't that what he was doing when he was working on the car? Like it's like up under in the.
Okay, you're right. So I missed it. Because I knew obviously it's not in his luggage. They're checking his luggage. He doesn't care. So it must be hidden somewhere within the car. I must have missed that somehow. So yeah, that was another one where I wasn't sure if I missed it or they just didn't show it or what. But yeah. So yeah, maybe at that point they already had that general description. And that's why all those guys look that way. Because I mean, it is true. They don't check every single person that comes over the border. So maybe that was their reasoning. They already had this description. And jumping to the end again, the whole thing is his last disguise is he pretends to be like a guy missing part of his leg on crutches. And then he has various identity papers, just like some sort of former soldier that gets him past the cop there. But what's weird is when our hero cop guy shows up at the parade, he runs specifically into that guy, and they have a quick conversation, and we don't get to hear what he says, but whatever he says makes him realize that was him. I'm not sure, I'm not even sure what they could have said. And even if he told him, okay, I let a guy with one leg through here, but whatever he says makes him say, that's him, and I have to go get him right now, and he's right. But the movie's not actually, it doesn't actually let you know what the dialogue is. I mean, here on the Wikipedia thing, it doesn't even really, in the plot summarization, it doesn't even really make any sense here. It says, when Label finds that a policeman allowed a one-legged man with crutches to pass through the cordon, the two race to the building. It's like, why? how did he find this out, and why does that mean anything to him?
I was going to ask you that too. Like, how did they know that was him?
Yeah. Unless he just thought, okay, like a one-legged guy, that seems like a kind of an obvious sort of disguise. Like maybe it's just using his gut. I don't know. But
yeah,
I wasn't sure about that. Yeah, so that's another one of those things that was not really explicitly stated that left me a little puzzled, and I don't mind it. It's not a criticism, but it's another one of those things that made me wonder if there was something I'd missed or something I just wasn't thinking about, or you know that kind of thing. I don't know. This movie is shot on mostly it's shot on location. There's a few places where they couldn't get the exact thing, like at the beginning for showing the first assassination attempt, the real life one. There was a bit where for that they couldn't actually get into the actual place or something like that. Let me see what it was. It was like oh, now of course I can't find it. Zinnemann was able to film in locations usually denied to filmmakers, such as the inside. Yeah, he's inside the actual Ministry of the Interior. Like that's not a set. That's the Ministry of the Interior when they're having those meetings. Due in large part to French producer Julien Derode's skill in dealing with authorities. Nevertheless, the opening sequence was not shot in the Élysée courtyard, but at the Hôtel de Soubise. Yeah, so the Élysée courtyard was where I guess that would have happened in real life. But a lot of the stuff is actual locations throughout parts of France and Great Britain and a few parts of Italy as well, including some fairly prominent locations like some well-known hotels and some of those government buildings, like we said. So a lot of stuff shot on location, including that cool train station in the Alps. That is Venay, or maybe Vens, but it's anyway, it's still around. That was a cool place just before he gets on the train. But yeah, it's nice seeing movies that are shot on location. And actually, the end of the movie is set during what is it? A Liberation Day parade or celebration. That's the thing. Some of that footage is actual footage of a parade, but not Liberation Day, like something else. But some of that footage is a real parade that actually happened that summer in '73 in Paris. So that's kind of cool too. But then they also had a part where they had a day where the cops shut down a part of the city so they could film it specifically, which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what did you think about the ending? It was, I thought it was kind of anticlimactic.
That he misses is kind of anticlimactic, right? Like, it's like how lucky, I guess they're trying to show how lucky they are too. Because, I mean, they're running, they're not going to catch up to him before he gets the first shot off, but De Gaulle moves a bit and he misses. Although I guess it's a really good silencer since nobody hears it or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, silencers are never realistic in movies. Like, silencers are not very good, even in today. Even in 2021, in the high-tech wonderland we live in, silencers are still actually quite loud. Like, they're not nearly as good as we see. They're almost always wrongly portrayed in movies. We either get that sound or we get the thump sound that we have in this movie, and neither is particularly accurate. Basically, they sound like gunshots, just slightly muffled. Like, they don't change the sound of the shot. We don't live in a world with really great silencers yet. Silencers aren't actually used that much either.
Well, I think because they, it really slows the bullet down too. So
yeah, so you'd have to be more accurate. Plus, I mean, unless you're doing some sort of like covert black ops shit or something, like it can't be really widely used. I mean, I can remember at least a couple times hearing about like guys getting busted in the States for trying to buy silencers, like on the black market or whatever. Like they'd be like immediately arrested for doing it. Like they do undercover stings and stuff for people trying to buy silencers.
Yeah, you can get a license. I don't know how hard that is to get, but to have one. I don't think it's a silencer, it's a suppressor.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, similar type thing, I guess. But yeah, why would anyone need that? I guess to I don't know. Maybe shooting groundhogs or something. I don't know.
I don't know. Apparently, the film The Jackal was even though it's such a loose remake, was going to use the title The Day of the Jackal, and Zinnemann fought against it. told the studio not that they couldn't have the same title. And Frederick Forsyth himself, the author of the book, wouldn't even allow himself to be credited. So he's not anywhere in the credits. Like, it doesn't say based on the book by. Like, he wanted nothing to do with it.
I mean, I
Which
don't
is
think
fair
it's
enough.
a bad movie. I mean, I don't think it's bad.
Yeah, I don't see if there's anything wrong with that. Because, I mean, it's something that's loosely based on a movie that was based on your book. I don't see anything wrong. If I was an author, I wouldn't mind. Because they're not saying, oh, this is a straight adaptation of the book. They're just saying, you know, this was inspired by the work of this book. Like, so I think if I was the author, I wouldn't mind. But
Sure.
especially considering there is a fairly faithful adaptation already out there. It's not like this is the first and only movie made about your book. But I mean, I don't know. People can be particular about those things.
Well, I mean, I guess that means he didn't get paid either.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, yeah, the Jackal, it's not like they were trying to cash in on his name or anything like that. It was just sort of like, when you make a movie like that, it's the courtesy and the right thing to do is to credit, you know, the original author, and he didn't want it. So fair enough, I suppose.
I mean, it was a pretty successful movie from what I remember.
It was quite successful. It enjoys really great critical ratings to this day. Another movie that our friend Roger Ebert really liked. I wasn't prepared for how good it really is. It's not just a suspense classic, but a beautifully executed example of filmmaking. Oh, he says put together like a fine watch. Then maybe that's why I said it.
Oh.
Screenplay meticulously assembles an incredible array of material. Another movie that came out around the same time that reminds me a bit of, again, is The French Connection, which was another movie of the same era that was sort of like about kind of like real world kind of crime going on in the 70s. I actually like this better than The French Connection.
I don't really care for The French Connection, honestly.
I even think like I even think that the car chase in The French Connection is a bit overrated. I mean, it's a well-executed car chase, and it is very suspenseful, and it's good. And I like Gene Hackman fine and everything, but yeah, it's never. I mean, it's always mentioned as like one of the big movies of the 70s, and I'm not trying to say it isn't or anything like that. But yeah, personally, I've never been a big fan either. But this movie obviously has some parallels with it, and I actually prefer this movie. I'd have to say.
Me too. Yeah, I think French Connection's overrated. Honestly, I mean, I get the car chase is really well done and stuff, but you know, Gene Hackman does fine, but just doesn't do it for me.
No, I mean, I'd like to see it again because it's been a few years, but I don't think it's going to really change my feelings on it. I think of it as pretty good, but never quite got why it's considered like one of the marquee films of the decade. But it is an important crime film, and we're doing a series on crime, although specifically British crime, and it is important to mention it, I suppose. Like I said, there's parts of this movie that remind me a bit of The French Connection, but some of it is just that 70s feel, right? Even though the movie, again, this movie's technically set in the 60s, it still has a very 70s feel, and there's a lot of the 60s and 70s in Europe that look very similar, at least to somebody like us who didn't grow up there during that. I mean, there are some anarchisms in this movie that, you or I are not going to notice. There's a few vehicles that were not around in the 60s that are in this movie, but not a big deal.
Really? Yeah.
Just a couple cars and like some sort of like bus or something. I don't know. It's not like they're like big glaring things.
Yeah. I mean, Friedkin, as far as Friedkin goes, I'll take, Live and Die in L.A. or, plenty of his other movies over French Connection.
Friedkin's the one that did Sorcerer, isn't he?
That's what I was going to say. I thought so.
Yeah, so there's that connection, I suppose, for this show anyway. What's funny is I think you and I both agreed, like the whole opening stuff of that movie is really good. It's actually better than like the actual story the movie gets into. I liked all the stuff of the internet, them in the different countries doing their things. Once they wound up in the village, it kind of wasn't as interesting. I don't know. Jacob's the French guy. Like, I need to see it again, but I don't know. It's not. I don't know. I guess I need to see it again before I can really say exactly what it is that I. Again, it's nothing I dislike about it. It's more just like not loving it, I suppose.
I feel the same. Yeah,
I certainly don't dislike it. And as I said, I do think it's an important film for how it did bring some realism into sort of the crime genre going forward. And then the 70s is arguably like the best decade for crime. I mean, obviously there's been good crime movies from every decade, but the 70s has a lot of really good crime stuff. And it was the rise of somebody like Martin Scorsese, who, again, I'm not a huge fan of. Like, I don't think Mean Streets is all that great, but I do recognize Mean Streets as an important movie for what it accomplished and, you know, how it went about doing things. Sort of like a guerrilla style movie. You know, what's funny about that is there's a song used in the movie that they didn't give any credit to. And for years, some famous songwriter, I can't remember who it is now, but anyway, that person, like, for years, that was like a steady stream of revenue for them because, like, a court decided they were owed all these royalties for it.
Oh, wow.
I can't remember what song. It's a song that's used fairly prominently in Mean Streets. Anyway, being the gritty guerrilla independent movie that it was, it didn't get it permission to use the music it used, and yeah, they got slapped with a lawsuit that gave quite a bit of money to. I can't think of the song or the person, but I remember reading that not too long ago. Maybe I can find it.
Yeah, I don't like Mean Streets that much either. I mean, I love, you know, Goodfellas and stuff, but I don't really care.
I mean, Mean Streets, you get it. It's good as a beginning, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's a beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's for first feature film. It's great. Yeah, and you know, made the careers of, I mean, De Niro,
Keitel.
Is that it? I know.
Well, I mean, wasn't was Pesci in that too?
I'm not sure.
Pesci might be in it. I don't know. David Carradine's in it, but not as anybody important.
Oh.
I think it was one of those like Motown songs. Which now I can't find it.
He just used some random song in his movie and didn't think it was gonna be a problem.
Yeah, I don't know. It definitely turned out to be a problem.
I guess didn't think the movie was gonna be as popular as it was, maybe.
I mean, that's probably a problem with it too, right? Like it's like nobody's gonna know this movie. Like this is just something to get a movie made, so no one's gonna take notice of it. Look at the soundtrack here. Maybe if I see the name of the song, I'll recognize it.
Yeah, he was doing that even way back then.
Because I mean, he had some Rolling Stones songs. I know it wasn't a Rolling Stones song. It might have been "Please, Mr. Postman."
That's a pretty popular song.
Yeah, by the Marvelettes. Please, Mr. Postman is by the Marvelettes, but I need to look up now who the actual writer was. It's somebody we all know. I'm just going to take another look and make. Oh, I know what it was, and it's even worse. It's "Be My Baby," the Ronettes hit. So I think that gave a lot of money to fucking Phil Spector. I think that's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was. So that's what I think that's what it was. I think I have been, because not too long ago I was reading about I was reading a lot. I was on a kick of Brian Wilson, you know, and all his like crazy work with the Beach Boys. And a big part of Brian Wilson's transformation was when he heard the song "Be My Baby." He was like blown away by the production techniques that Phil Spector used, and he became sort of obsessed with Phil Spector's stuff. So then I was like reading some stuff about Phil Spector, and I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Yeah, I think Phil Spector got a lot of royalties and stuff off having that song being used, even though he's not one of the, I guess because he's the producer, because he's not the main songwriter of that. Several other people wrote that song, but anyway, and maybe they got it too, but it was on Phil. Yeah, I think it was somewhere on this page about Phil Spector, that lunatic.
I'm not real familiar with Phil Spector. I need to do some research.
Well, he was one of the most important like record producers in the 60s and 70s, going to the 80s. He was one of the first people that took the idea of as being a producer in the studio, like using the studio as an instrument. The idea of like, you're not just there to record the songs, but you're really there to like breathe life into them and blah, blah, blah. And he had that whole thing called the wall of sound that he perfected. But his thing was in the early 60s, he worked with various sort of like Motown groups, but most notably the Ronettes, which is one of those girl groups. And he married the main singer in that. And I don't know why she still to this day uses the name Ronnie Spector. I'm like, this is a man who literally imprisoned you, abused you, threatened to kill you multiple times, and like made your life a living hell for years, and you still use his name for some reason. It's like, you don't need that as your claim to fame. You're in the Ronettes. But anyway, like, yeah, so he produced a lot of those, but they were kind of his group, and he married her. And yeah, by the end of the 60s, he was like one of the big producers, and other people like Brian Wilson were really inspired by him. It's funny. He's the only person besides George Martin to be producer on a Beatles record. He had produced technically it wasn't their final record released, but it was the final one that or I was getting mixed up. Which one is the final, but there's Let It Be, and then there's Abbey Road. One of them is the final one, and one of them is the last final one, and they came out in reverse order. Whichever one was the final one came out first. Yeah, but anyway, Let It Be. And actually, what's funny is like I don't like the production on Let It Be. And back in like 2004, hell, I think I have it. Maybe I can dig it out. No, I don't. Yeah, I'll show you really quickly because it's right here.
And Let It Be is the last one, I believe.
So like 2003 or 2004, they actually came out with an album. This is Let It Be, but as you can see, it's using the negative. It's called Let It Be Naked. And basically, it strips away most of the production that that's Moon Knight, Mark Spector, that Spector used. For instance, like on a song like The Long and Winding Road and Let It Be, they had like big orchestral sections with horns and stuff like that. Like all that's gone. The extra like background choral singing in my favorite Beatles song ever, Across the Universe, that's all gone. And I much prefer it. I can't stand it. And that was a big part. Like and this is weird too, because my favorite Beatle was always John. But John was the only one who liked what Spector did. He said that there was a shit record and that Phil Spector basically saved it. None of the other Beatles felt that way, and it eventually culminated in this, like stripping away all of Spector's. And I much prefer it. I feel like it's super overproduced. Like I don't like all that added. I like having the songs just like speak for themselves. I love hearing The Long and Winding Road just with the band and the keyboardist, and no extra bells and whistles. But anyway, I've never seen that, but I've heard of it because I've looked up Harvey Keitel's career, but I've never actually seen that movie.
Going on my list. Neither.
Anyway, Phil Spector's a lunatic, and he's finally dead, isn't he?
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, he was in jail for finally murdering somebody.
He died in January.
Yeah. But I mean,
wait, he murdered someone?
Oh yeah. Although much later. I mean, he was always a crazy, horrible person, but he didn't actually murder somebody until much later in life. Let's see where the murder is.
Yeah, this is not like on the Wikipedia anywhere.
Let's see. So he shot Lana Clarkson in 2003. And his like defense for that always was like it was like a weird accident or some sort of like suicide gone wrong, and it didn't make any sense. He was always a lunatic. Like for instance, I don't know if it was Spector, but not Ronnie Spector, but it was some woman he lived with. He like made a glass coffin for her and kept it in the basement, and always told her he was going to kill her and put her in it. Like he was a nut job, Phil Spector. Like he had and as I said, he just terrorized Ronnie. Like he abused her, he imprisoned her within the home. He was a good talent, and maybe a little overrated as far as that goes. I mean, it's still the bands that are doing it, but I mean, he had songwriting ability. He started as a songwriter, and just like a lot of those people in the '60s, I mean, he was super young. He was like when he was like 25, he was like a god in the music industry. He was ridiculously influential and powerful, and he was like 25, 26. But anyway, yeah. I don't care really about his contributions that much, except I'm a big Brian Wilson fan, so I was always interested in how he inspired Brian Wilson to become because Brian Wilson was a great songwriter, but then he became the guy that he was, where he controlled all aspects of everything as the producer, which led to some really great stuff and some really weird stuff, which often happens. But the idea of the studio as instrument is something that appeals to me. The idea that like when you're hiring a producer, It's almost like hiring another member of your band, just in sort of a different capacity. I've always been really interested in that stuff, how bands record albums, even though that seems to be less and less relevant as time goes by. But yeah, he's had a crazy life of course, being associated with really some of the most talented and famous musical acts of all time, but also just for crazy, horrible shit that he did and said. He was a cold-blooded psycho for sure. So yeah, he died so he didn't actually wind up in prison until 2009. So just like a lot of these guys, like he didn't get it until towards the end. Although at least as far as the murder goes, the murder was later too. That was 2003. It's not like he killed somebody way back when, but he would have killed somebody back then, if circumstances allowed it. He was that kind of guy. But anyway, I dragged all that out because, so the song Be My Baby, which is definitely the Ronettes' most famous, and it is a really good song, that song was used in Mean Streets without permission. And I guess that for many years supplied a lot of revenue to Phil Spector and people for that because of some sort of court case. So Mean Streets not only didn't make money, but it actually sort of cost Scorsese and people money for a long time.
Well, that's a pretty popular song. I mean...
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was a big hit.
Yeah, I'm looking up the Ronettes now. They're really interesting. Their mother, or the two sisters, their mother was African American Cherokee, and their father was Irish. So
yeah, I feel bad for so many of those young African American girl groups from back then because they were so mistreated.
Yeah.
They were so young and they were so talented and they were working so hard and, people were just fucking them over left and right.
Yeah.
It's like, here's $100. Wow. Then their singles go like gold and they get nothing.
Guys like Phil Spector.
Yeah, guys like Phil Spector. And he even married her and made her life a living hell. What's interesting about that song, and it also shows some of his like craziness too, is like the Ronettes were a girl group. She was the main singer, but the other two sang too, right? They are not on Be My Baby. That's all her, and her voice doubled and tripled. The others don't sing at all on Be My Baby. There's no reason for this. It was just Spector again going, no, it'll just be Ronnie. I always knew the song, but the song, I grew up with a cover version of the song from the 70s by Andy Kim. I don't know how well known Andy Kim was in the U.S. Decently well known, but he's Canadian. He was a big Canadian star, and I always liked his version of Be My Baby. He added a little bit he sped it up and added a little bit of urgency to it. I like that a lot. Anyway, Andy Kim, again, not to go off on a weird tangent, but he was interesting too, because he was like, he was born of some sort of like Middle Eastern heritage, I don't know, Lebanese or what like that. And obviously Andy Kim was not his name. And throughout most of his life, he was like discouraged from, being who he really was. They really wanted to play down that he had anything ethnic about him. It was just like, no, you're just a kind of like a dark looking white guy, I feel bad, but again, that's sort of the era. It's like
they used to do that a lot. Like, I mean, even like go back to, Martin Sheen, like I guess the name Estevez, just like a Spanish last name would be, taboo. And
nowadays, people see it as colorful and cool.
Sure. Yeah.
It's funny, like Emilio used Estevez not just because he wanted to distance himself from the Sheens, because he was like the same thing as like Nicolas Cage. He didn't want to be Nicolas Coppola, right?
Yeah.
He didn't want to always be associated with Coppola, so he picked Cage. It was the other way around with Estevez, because Estevez, I guess, was the real name. But he's just like, they're not using it. They're known as the Sheens, so I'll keep Estevez. I just watched today on the latest episode of Mighty Ducks Game Changers. In the 6th episode, some of the original Ducks do come back, but only like 6 of them.
He's in it, right?
Oh, yeah, he's like a main character. Yeah, you don't get to see any of the original Ducks until this episode, but he's in it from the beginning.
The original goalie, I know he like got really bad into drugs and stuff, and now he's clean.
He hasn't been on it.
He's clean now, though.
Yeah, the ones they showed, I don't know if more are going to show up or not. I don't know how well you're going to know the Ducks by their names. But for people who might recognize the Ducks by their names, Fulton is in it. Fulton was the tough guy with the hard shot that he recruited off the street.
Oh, yeah.
Guy DeGermain, or whatever his name was, who was one of the originals, was there. The very first girl on the team, Connie, she actually, by the second one, was dating him. They're married now, apparently, in the continuity. She was there. I know you'll remember Averman. He was the wise ass with the glasses. Who was like, who sounded like a young Rob Schneider. And who was the other? Oh, and Banks was there. I was really surprised by Banks. I thought he'd be more handsome. Like, he's not bad looking, but I don't know. He did not age the way I expected him to age. So, I mean, they mentioned Charlie. I don't remember why they say Charlie doesn't show up. That's, of course, he's the main kid, the one that was on Dawson's Creek.
Oh, yeah. I know you're talking about. I can't think of his name.
Yeah. Not James Vanderbeek.
Joshua Jackson.
Yeah, Joshua Jackson. I'm hoping that Joshua Jackson will eventually show up. Here's something I didn't know about Mighty Ducks for many years. That role, he is kind of the main kid in the first movie. Was originally offered to Jake Gyllenhaal, and Gyllenhaal turned it down.
Wow.
Not sure why. But I don't know if those 6 are the only ones that are going to show up or if they'll have more. I'm not saying that makes it worth watching. I feel a weird obligation to watch it. Even when I was a kid, it's not like I thought the Ducks movies were good. They were ridiculous. And it's funny. It's like all these years later, it's kind of like what they did with the Full House thing when they made Fuller House. It's like, okay, it's 2019 or whatever. We know what Full House was, but here's a chance we could, I don't know, make it good. And they're like, that's not what people want. We're going to do it exactly the same. And that's what they did. This is kind of the same thing. It's like, here's all these years later, maybe we could show hockey more realistically, or no, we'll just do it the same way. Because it's still ridiculous. But I don't care because they're still, at the end of the day, they bring attention to hockey and they have a positive spin on it. And they do say some things that are true and nice. So I guess that's why. Oh, you're fucking with me.
No, man.
That was, wow. Now that's a downward spiral.
And let's see.
That is depressing.
I saw an updated photo recently. Yeah, I think that's him now, I believe.
Okay, that's a lot better.
I don't know. Meth, heroin, I don't know what the hell that is, man. That's bad news.
That ruined my day.
Look at this.
I mean, he was a good actor. He was in Heavyweights,
God, he looks 60 years old, too. He's younger than I am.
Jesus. That's depressing.
I figured you'd seen that already.
No, I heard that he had problems. I mean, a lot of actors do. I didn't know it went that deep. Holy shit. That is, I hope he's doing better now, man. Because I definitely enjoyed his work back in the day. We won't stay here too long, but I always I always wonder about what happened between Mighty Ducks 1 and 2. Because in Mighty Ducks 2, they add several more people. That was the other guy that was on the show today. He wasn't even they say the original Ducks, but he's not an original Duck because he didn't show up till D2. And that was the Asian kid. His name was Wu. He was one of the kids that was added to the team when they became Team USA because he was like he was like a figure skating champion, right? He had like crazy moves, and he has that whole scene where like basically Fulton or maybe Portland, the other tough guy who was added, teach him how to fight, like the stick glove shirt thing. Like they mentioned that in this. So yeah, he's not even an original guy, but he was the other guy they brought back. And they did have a moment where he showed he could still do some figure skating, which was pretty impressive. I mean, the guy's like in his late 30s. And he was doing like figure skating moves with like some hockey gear on. Like he wasn't like skating unencumbered. So it was pretty impressive. So he's the other guy. But yeah, what I wondered is, okay, so in D2, they add him. So they add Wu. They add Julie the cat, the other goalie, because they only had one goalie before that, which makes no sense. They add the cowboy kid with his crazy stick handling. I don't know his name. They add the other tough guy who teams with Fulton to be the Bash Brothers. And is there anybody else they add?
Russ.
Oh, you're right. They add Russ, the Keenan Thompson. And they also add like the super fast skater guy that can't stop. So that's 6 new guys that they added to the team. Part of the reason they were able to do this was because at least 2 or 3 of the original Ducks just disappeared and nobody ever talked about them. Because even though Connie was the original girl, there was a second girl that got added to the team. In fact, she was the first actual figure skater added to the team. I don't know how well you remember the original movie, but there's a part where they're coming together, they go to recruit. There's this kid who's kind of like short and fat, and she's the sister. And they decide to recruit them both. Like, he wants to play hockey, but she's mad because she just wants to figure skate. And there's a good part too where she goes, "What do I know about hockey?" And she like slams him with the stick and knocks him to the ice. And he goes, "More than you think." He's also the kid who later on, there's a game where a guy on the other team takes a slap shot and it hits him right in the head and it dents his helmet. And they come out and check on him. And remember, Gordon goes, "How many fingers am I holding up?" And they go, "He would know that anyway." Anyway, those two kids, at least, they were gone. They are not in the second or third movie. They just disappeared completely. I don't know if they're the only ones. I need to watch the original again, which I might even do tonight since it's clearly on my mind. Not the other thing that was on my mind was, since it's going to be the new Saw, to watch Saw, and now they're all gone. I got to watch Saw 1, and all the other ones
they're gone?
Off Crave anyway. No, they were all on Crave for me. It was only about a year ago that I watched them all, just out of when I was in Sydney. Or maybe it was 2 years ago, but anyway. But now I really want to watch 2 and 3 again because I barely remember them. I'll say very quickly, the thing that bothers me most about the Saw series, at least as far as like story-wise goes, is Hoffman. Hoffman is such a horrible, loathsome piece of shit. And he's like a major character in like 6 of the movies. And and here's another thing. So I used to wonder if Saw 6 and Saw 3D were the same movie. They are not. Saw 6 is its own movie. Saw 3D, the final chapter, is the one after that. So anyway, and it's not until that final chapter one where somebody finally kills him. But before that, he's such a horrible, loathsome piece of shit, and nobody can stop him. He just gets away with it. People, even at the end of 6, he even gets caught in a trap, and he gets himself out of it. It's infuriating. So that's one of the other reasons I can't like Saw. Because I hate Hoffman with all my heart. And for movie after movie, I'm waiting for somebody to outsmart him, and they don't. It's not until 7 that it happens. And by this time, he's even killed Jigsaw's wife, and horribly. Through all of 7, Jigsaw's wife is in like police custody, and he's openly threatening her now. At this point, it's all out in the open. They know who he is. Like, for a while, he framed the FBI agent, and for a while, they thought he was actually dead. It's all out in the open. Everybody knows that Hoffman. That's a wonderful sentiment, Joe Bob. I wish so much, but it's after so many years of being beaten down. I have so much heart. It's so hard to believe in them. I mean, to lose in the playoff qualifier last year, we didn't even have real playoffs last year. Remember, because of the weird COVID stuff, they did that weird thing where they'd have 5-game play-ins to get into the real playoffs. They played Columbus, who wouldn't have even made the playoffs, and they lost. Like, that is. So I don't know. Anyway, I hate Hoffman. But thanks, Joe. I send those positive vibes because I have none. I've been so beaten down by years of disappointment and failure. I mean, yes, they are absolutely good enough, and yet they just find ways to lose year after year. Anyway, but
I can always tell when you're pissed off at the Leafs when you go radio silent for like weeks at a time.
I'll try not to do that this time. I got to get mature about this. It's just so hard being like on Twitter because you follow hockey people, and I mean. The Leafs, for a lot of reasons, the Leafs in Montreal have never played in the playoffs in my lifetime. The last time they played in the playoffs was 1979, where they got steamrolled, which isn't that bad because that was the end of a dynasty by Montreal. That was their 4th cup in a row at that time. One of the best teams of all time. No shame in that. But I mean, throughout my life, I learned, like, my dad's a Montreal fan, and I've liked Montreal mostly since, like, the late 90s. Usually I just felt sorry for them when they were so bad. So I don't actually even hate the team. But, like, in my adulthood with online being what it was, like, I'm exposed to so many, like, annoying... Like, just they jump on everything, Toronto haters. Like, I don't think I could live down them losing to Montreal. And again, they shouldn't. There's no way they should. They're way better. They're way higher in the standings. But because of this year, where you only play within your division, they're locked into playing them no matter what, pretty much. And they just lost them their last game in overtime. Not a big deal. And they have 2 more games against them because, again, crazy schedule. You're only playing in your division. You're just playing the same teams over and over again. I asked my parents, I was like, how could you stand the original 6? I'm so sick of seeing these teams. Like, people hear me complain. I hate that there's 31 teams in the league. Next year, there's going to be 32. The Seattle Kraken, they are alive. I hate having so many teams. I feel like we're diluting the talent. But, I mean, playing the same 7 over and over again makes me want to kill myself. Anyway, too many hockey tangents there. But anyway, I want to find the other Saws, but the only other Saw, and that's the reason why it's fresh in my mind, was Saw. So the only ones I got to watch was the original Saw and Saw the Final Chapter, which was on my Prime. So yeah, Saw the Final Chapter. You finally get to see like Hoffman get his, but not until after he's like openly stalks and threatens Jigsaw's wife, kills everyone in his path to get to her. Not only kills her, but kills her horribly by putting the weird bear trap thing on her face and smashing her mouth open. Like, Jesus, like, what are you guys going for here? Right after that, he gets caught by like other people, and I won't spoil it for people who've forgotten, but it's a callback all the way to the first one, because I think that's the only reason I come back to Saw, is because its continuity is amazing. To the point where, like, if you were one of those people that like went to see the new Saw movie every year, you know, for something to do, it's like, oh, it's October, there's a new Saw movie. Most of, like, 90% of those people don't remember any of it. They're just throwing into a new thing. The only real way to watch Saw is back to back within a short time frame, because they all happen right on top of each other, and they're loaded with callbacks to the other stuff. Like, if you just pop on Saw 6 and you haven't seen a Saw in a few years, it's going to be loaded with like flashbacks involving characters and actions from other ones. You're going to be completely lost.
Yeah, I still haven't seen. I guess the final chapter, I think, is the only one I haven't seen yet. But I'm going to try to fix. They are still on HBO Max, thankfully.
Yeah. My HBO Max is so different from yours. It pisses me off. It doesn't seem fair.
It is, man. I mean, it's some things will be similar, but then others, you know, completely different.
Yeah. I mean, that is a fair point. I think that was Jacob that said about Hoffman, because, yeah, he's just brutal. And I'll give credit to the actor, because it's kind of in a similar thing to this movie. Like, he's very good as like just a straight psychopath, unlike the more theatrical ones you often see in movies. Like, Hoffman has like zero personality at all. He's just like a blank slate that goes about doing what he does to like whatever it does to benefit himself, and just dispatching others that get in his way. The only time he ever takes pleasure in killing anyone is when he kills Jigsaw's wife. The rest of the time, he's just like this fucking robot. And I get that that's kind of interesting, because it's more in line with what a real psychopath in real life is like, right? But just over the course of the movies, you keep waiting for him to fuck up, somebody to get the better of him, and it just keeps not happening. Yes, I saw the final chapter, it catches up with him, you know, they get him. But that's after him having like 4 or 5 movies of just doing whatever he wanted to everyone around him, and I hated it. And it actually made me appreciate the original Jigsaw more, even though I agree with Jacob's original sentiment that he's like, it's really self-righteous and blah, blah, blah. Because, I mean, on the one hand, you have Jigsaw, who has his dumb, like, crusade that he thinks serves a purpose, which is annoying because he's so hypocritical and stuff like that. But then you have somebody like Hoffman, who is just in it because I guess he likes killing people, which is a little bland.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the other thing, too. Like, I got a little... Because I hadn't seen the others in a long time. All throughout the final chapter, she's acting, and I can't remember if she's lying or what, because I haven't seen it in a while. She's saying, like, how she didn't know, or she was afraid, and like that's what she's gone back to again in 7. She's saying like, I didn't know, I had no idea, but I'm pretty sure you're right. Like in earlier ones, she's like aware of her husband's work and approved of it. Anyway, let's not get completely bogged down by Saw, but I am hoping to see some of the other early ones again. I'm a weird person. I thought Saw 4 was the best one, and then what happens in Saw 5 like ruins it for me. And most of that is Hoffman getting the better of the FBI guy. Like, I couldn't stand that. That pissed me off to no end. I also thought, as bad as 3 was, 4 helped redeem it a little because it had the twist that 4 and 3 happened simultaneously. I don't know. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, final chapter, and then there's one called Jigsaw, which I guess is technically an unofficial prequel, and now there's something called like Spiral, which I guess is going to be a big deal because of the people that are like Samuel Jackson's in it, Chris Rock is in it, which seems really odd, but what do I know? I have no idea where in the timeline it's supposed to be at all. And I shouldn't care because I'm mostly dismissive of those movies. They have a hockey connection. Did you know that?
Mm-mm.
So one of the original producers for the original movie, one of the people that made sure the movie got made by throwing some of his money into it, was a man who you'll see as a producer in every single one. His name is Oren Koules. And Oren Koules played junior hockey, I believe, for the OHL in the early 80s. And he was eventually, in the 90s, had transitioned. He was part of the Tampa Bay Lightning staff. I don't remember what his job was. But I can't remember if he ever actually played pro hockey. He might have even been drafted. But anyway, so that's kind of interesting. But it was through the Tampa thing that he wound up, because he was living in Florida, and I guess that's where the script was or something. But anyway, I can't remember the story. But it is kind of interesting that Oren Koules is now who never made it really as a pro. Yeah, he never made it as a pro hockey player. He played like one game in the IHL. Oh, he wasn't playing the OHL. He played in the WHL. So that's what's known as the Western Hockey League. That's the major junior league out west. So that's British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan. Yeah, so he played for several teams. He played for the Portland Winterhawks. I've never even heard of the Great Falls Americans, so they must not have lasted long. The Medicine Hat Tigers, the Spokane Flyers, and then some sort of Calgary Brandon team that didn't last. Wow, there was a lot of teams in flux. This is from 79 to 82. He moved around a lot. But anyway, in the 80-81, he played on the Spokane Flyers. That must have had somebody of note on it. Who played on that? I know nobody cares. Not really. Not really seeing anybody. He was one of the leading scorers on it, too. I mean, he was 19 by this time. No, nobody that stands out on that team. Okay, wait. I need to find at least one connection. That was his best season. He played 67 games, had 73 points, 112 penalty minutes. Let's see his last year. He played as an overager in 81, 82. And, man, I thought I could connect him to somebody. He didn't play with anybody. I mean, I'm sure some of the... Okay, there, finally. Ron Hextall was his goaltender for Brandon that last year. Ron Hextall is the lunatic goalie who I've mentioned to you that you should look up clips of because there'll never be another goalie like him. The meanest, craziest goalie in the history of the NHL. But he was also really good. Like, he was actually a very good goaltender, too. But, I mean, he put up multiple seasons of 100 penalty minutes, which is just bonkers. Like, goaltenders don't do that. They get maybe 7 or 8 penalty minutes tops. But yeah, you should look up some YouTube clips of him, particularly the 89 playoffs where he just totally loses it and goes after Chris Chelios. But anyway, yeah, you should look that up sometime. So there, Oren Koules is connected to somebody, Ron Hextall. And Oren Koules was one of the original producers of Saw. But the point I was trying to make that I didn't finish is that Oren Koules never made it as a professional hockey player. But nowadays, he's as rich or richer than a lot of them because of the success of Saw. So funny how your life goes sometimes.
Yeah. Somehow he started producing movies.
Oren Koules is American too, which would have made him quite the rarity to be in the WHL back then. Like nowadays, not that big of a deal, but like in the 79 through 82, there were probably like only a handful of Americans in that league entirely. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's part of the appeal. One thing that's kind of funny about how the one I just watched, the final chapter, opens is like, you know how they usually open with one of those weird death games. This one does too, but the difference is it's not in like some derelict warehouse somewhere. It's like in like on a busy public street, and everybody around can see it happen. It's like, how the hell did this happen? But it's like glass. They're like in a glass cage, like, and there's all sorts of onlookers watching it, wondering if it's like performance art. That's kind of a different spin. Although again, it's one of the movies that does try to show you the logistics. It's like, okay, we'll actually show you him buying these places, fixing them up, working with other people. So it's like, okay, well, how did you do this one? Because this is like a public street. Like, how fast did you set this up? And how could you like drag 3 unconscious bodies and set up this crazy thing? Like, yeah, like in like this public. Yeah, anyway, going on too long about but hopefully I'll be able to find some of their movies and watch them because now I just have a bug in my brain that I need to watch them. I don't know why, because they're not really enjoyable, and I do hate off them. Anyway, we will just have some final thoughts here, I suppose, because we're going to keep this episode a bit shorter. Time's a bit more of a factor tonight, unfortunately. It's an interesting one to kick off British crime with, because like we said, it's not maybe what you think of with British crime, because it's a British movie that's about crime, but it's not about British crime. This is like international political thriller crime, but we never specified exactly how to go. Plus, we want to do the movie because it's a good movie. But we're going to do at least 3 or 4. Yeah, we'll probably do 3, maybe 4. Yeah, we usually make these series 4 or 5 episodes long. There definitely will be some ones that focus on specifically British crime. We're going to get to those. But it's still a good movie. And plus, I guess I really wanted an excuse to watch it after so many years because I was aware of it. I knew it had a good reputation. I figured I would like it. Definitely glad I saw it. I like it. It's an interesting career for that director because like he wasn't even a British director himself, although he did do some British productions and he'd actually done some famous Westerns earlier on. So I think it speaks to some of his versatility as a filmmaker because he's doing some fairly different sorts of subject matter, which is pretty cool. And as we said, like the whole movie hinges on the performance of Edward Fox. And we talked about this before, like sometimes like I don't know how much you can praise somebody for being sort of bland and emotionless, but I mean that is what the role calls for.
Right.
Like I don't know how much skill it takes to do that, but at the same time, I think there are certain actors, and it has nothing to do with talent. It just has to do with like maybe the way they look or sound. That if they do it, it doesn't work. It's like, okay, this is kind of silly. Like I'm not scared of this guy, that kind of thing. But this guy, he does, he's not physically imposing. He's not scary looking. He's very ordinary, but he does convey some sort of threatening aura. I think he does convey something that makes you buy him as like a serious killer, which
Right.
I mean, definitely comes from somewhere. So that is talent. It's just one of those things I don't really know how to explain or put into words, but there definitely is a process there that's calling on his talent to do that. So I appreciate that a lot. And as we said, I appreciate the realism of the movie, them taking a real life event and then following it up with something fictitious, but it feels believable. It feels like this could have happened, that the OAS could have tried something like this. It's like, okay, these attempts on De Gaulle have failed. Let's try hiring an outside professional. That all does feel very believable to me, which I appreciate.
Yeah, totally. It's very, very realistic. And the Jackal, the character of the Jackal is, I mean, I don't think, that's what makes this movie. I don't think anyone else really could have played that role. Like, no, they had a few other people they wanted in the role before they got Fox, but
that's interesting.
One of them was one of the James Bond guys. I forget which one it was. May have been Moore.
That would have taken some acting because even though he'd only done one James Bond movie the same year, so it's not like everybody in the world saw him as James Bond, but everybody saw him in the world saw him as the Saint, right? He was on the show The Saint, and that's one of the reasons why he kind of worked as Bond, because like the Saint was kind of like Bond in a way. And then he brought a more lighthearted Bond than what Connery had done. Not that Connery didn't have jokes and stuff, he did, but probably the most lighthearted Bond is Roger Moore, especially in later ones. So I think it would have taken a hell of an acting job for Roger Moore, even in '73, to like really convince the audience that he's this cold-blooded killer. Again, I mean, that's what acting is. That's the point. So maybe he could have done it, but I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to unsee things. I've said this before about, like, I really, and this is more of a unrealistic killer, or maybe not unrealistic, but a more rare type of killer. Is movie I watched over and over again, read the book over and again. It's Red Dragon. Like Ralph, is that Ralph Fiennes, or how do you ever say his name? Like, I can't unsee him in that role. Like, I see, like, he's in, like, Made in Manhattan or whatever, and he's dating Jennifer Lopez, and you're like, that's Francis Dollarhide, get away from him.
Yeah.
Like, I can't unsee him from that role. Like, I can't see him being a nice guy. I just see him as, like, this big, crazy, unhinged guy that's, like, super sick and dangerous. Like, I don't know if that's how good he was or how many times I've seen the movie, but I really can't I can't unsee that. So we said, like, I always appreciate a performance. I appreciate a performance like that, or somebody playing the Joker. But it is good to see the other side of it too, like the more cold, passionless, more ordinary, everyday sort of killer that you see. Again, we're gonna wrap up soon, but I will say a movie that I hadn't seen in many years and dismissed the first time I saw it, that I like a little more time the second time around, is I watched 1 Hour Photo. And that's kind of the same thing as like a movie we covered on here, although it's a little different because it's more about coming unhinged than necessarily having bad intentions. Because we did a movie on here called The Vanishing, which is all about like sort of the banality of evil. It's like, this guy does this evil act and there's not really any reason for him to do it, and he's just this completely bland, ordinary guy. There's nothing theatrical about him or scary or sinister. He does it. It is a bit different in Robin Williams one, 1 Hour Photo, whereas we see like this is a guy who's not necessarily that bad, but he's just had problems and they're creeping in and they're starting to like make him break, and that's why he does what he does. But still, even with that, like it's very different from his usual over the top, especially comedic characters. He's supposed to be sort of a bland, forgettable, kind of pathetic kind of guy. I do appreciate it a little more than I did initially. I still don't think it's that great. I think I probably like him better as the killer in the remake of Insomnia.
Insomnia,
Yeah, which was the same year, by the way.
really.
I think those are both 2002. And you can watch our episode on that, and we did an episode on the original Insomnia, which I much prefer, and I much prefer that killer. But I'm going all over the place now. I'm just saying there's different ways to portray killers and different kinds of killers to portray. And there's no kind that I dislike, and there's no kind that I love more than others. It just sort of all depends upon who does it and how they approach the role, I suppose.
Right.
And I appreciate Fox's approach to this sort of killer because it fits really well. And as I said, I think he's really believable. If he's not for other people, I get it, but I did buy into it. He did really seem like a professional assassin, and I really liked how just matter of fact he went about his business and everything. It wasn't about him showing rage or showing enjoyment. It was just, this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm going to do it. And, you never see him really show much emotion. And that seems believable. It seems like that's the type of person who would be the Jackal, who would be like an international assassin. So, to that question, I don't recognize the name, so I guess we haven't.
Funny Games.
Oh,
Funny Games.
I watch Funny Games. I'll never watch it again. I get what it's doing. Not for me. And I watched the original Funny Games, not the remake with what's her name?
Michael Pitt.
Yeah.
Naomi
Watts. Yeah. Oh, I don't want to see Naomi Watts being terrorized.
Uh-huh.
I like her too much. But yeah, he's done some other movies too. But yeah, I watch Funny Games to watch it. I get it. I know what they're doing. It's yeah, and I understand it's that whole thing about like how like so many movies, especially horror movies, it's like, why do we crave like a happy ending? Like we didn't watch it for that. We watched it for the violence. So that's kind of what they're doing, right? Like you wanted violence, here it is. It's like, oh, you thought the good guys would win, the bad guys would, be punished? No, that's not what's happening here. And I'm not saying that's why I dislike it. It's definitely an interesting movie, and it does speak to some of the stuff we said about banality of evil, right? It's more realistic. It's like we don't know these guys' backstories or why they do what they do. They're just like, we're crazy psychopaths, and we're going to toy with this family and kill them because it amuses us, and we can. And that is kind of real life. Maybe it's too real life. Maybe that's why it becomes such a downer for so many people. Maybe that's why I don't like The Strangers. Of course, I find The Strangers boring rather than suspenseful. I can really piss people off because people really like The Strangers and think it's like a masterclass of suspense. So I'm not going to touch that grenade. I'm just saying it didn't work for me. I've actually found it boring, not suspenseful. And I can't really put into words why. That's just me not trying to sell anybody that's a bad movie.
Yeah, I agree with you. Cool. Well, I guess we can wrap it up now.
Right. So that's Day of the Jackal, 1973. Charles de Gaulle, kind of cool. Even seeing a fictitious portrayal of him. Again, the movie's not really about him at the start of it. Well, there you go, Jacob. That's kind of how I feel. But I've encountered a lot of people that like really feel strongly that it's like a brilliant piece of like horror, and I'm not gonna, come down on them. That's fine if that's how they see it. But it never worked for me. Part of it was probably because of how like it did get like at the time it got a really overwhelming positive response. There was a delay in before me seeing it. So there was a little bit of hype for me seeing it too, that maybe, prejudiced me against a little bit about it. Because I get kind of annoyed when movies build up a lot of hype sometimes, which, why? I'm mad people liked something. I don't know. So, but I remember maybe having a bit of prejudice going into that movie going, okay, let's see what the big deal is. I kind of had that attitude. And I don't want to set it like I'm setting off to movies like I want to dislike this. Like, give me reasons to dislike this. Like, no. Every time I watch a movie, even a movie I know is bad, I'm like, maybe there's something to like here. That's kind of the attitude you have to have. There's plenty of movies that I know is not going to be a good movie. There might be something I can make fun of or enjoy just because it's stupid or bad. You try to have that attitude when you watch movies. Otherwise, you're just a masochist, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But, Day of the Jackal. An interesting way to kick off our British crime movies. We cannot tell you what the next one is. We're not that organized. But we will try to give you at least a few days heads up for it, I think, is what we'll try to work on. We will try to work this out so we can tell you at least a couple days in advance. So if maybe it's one you haven't seen, you can have a chance to watch it yourself. or maybe it's one you like and you just have an excuse to watch again. I don't know, something like that. So Jay and I will try to work that out within the next couple days quickly. Not I let this week kind of get away from me, which is kind of the reasons why we're here and why we're a bit constrained. But yeah, we're gonna figure that out so we can do a nice, a good series of 4 or 5 movies. And The Day of the Jackal is the start of that. And as soon as we know what the next part is, we will definitely announce that on Twitter.
Very cool.
All right, guys. That wraps things up. Thanks a lot for watching from Jay's Floating Head and myself.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Peace, guys.